So thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation, and thank you also, Carola, for setting the stage. I couldn't ask for a better start. What I want to talk about is a little bit about WHO and the work that we are doing in the European Center for Environment and Health, and then immediately speak about our work in progress on seaport and cities. So first of all, we part of the regional office that sits in Copenhagen, and we sit in Bonn. We deal with environment and health. It's a center for technical and scientific expertise on the impacts on the environment on health. We provide the 53 member states across Europe, from the Scandinavian countries to Russia and having Israel in the south, some state-of-the-art evidence on existing and emerging environmental health risks. We develop policy advice and international and regional guidelines, methods, tools to inform and support decision-making. We assist member states also to identify and implement policies in order to protect the environment and obviously health, and support member states in implementation of their commitment. When I speak about commitment, I want to refer to several the mandate that we have in WHO. First of all, the constitution of the WHO, then we have a global work plan coming from the headquarters, and then we have also a European work plan. And when it comes to the Bonn office on environment and health, we have a political process that includes ministries of environment and ministries of health from our 53 member states, and they gave us the mandate to look into environment and health. Recently, in 2017, we had a meeting in Ostrava, and one of the items among 6 items to focus on was cities. So we're in particular right now looking in cities, but now also specifically in cities that have also seaports. So I explained the work that the core function that we are dealing with. I will keep from here I will go on from here to talk about why seaport cities. So seaports and seaport cities attract increasing attention from environmental and public perspective. Impact of offshore and onshore economic activities, as was explained by Carola, in the seaport cities include shipping activities, terminal operation, port-related industrial or transport activities. It can be inland or onshore petrochemical plants, lots of trucking, lots of transportation. Also, we noticed that there are lots of variation among ports. It depends on functions of the port. It also depends on policies, on the size, on the legal system in each country. Many factors would affect what we would see in the sea, in the port, how efficient it is, has major impact on environment, because if ships are waiting to be uploaded and downloaded, then they emit more pollution. So this is also an impact. So it looks like it doesn't relate to environment, but efficiency in the port is much related to environment and obviously to health. So if we have an environmental concern because of the alteration of the biophysical environment, we see that quality of the natural environment, let it be wetland, estuaries, aquatic ecosystems, in terms of the marine, but also in pollution river. We see pollution of water, pollution of soil resources. We see air pollution coming from offshore and onshore related activities, noise related issues, greenhouse emissions. Invasive species and infection diseases are also attributed to port and activities. Also, when we look at the life quality and health concerns, we look at port laborers that are usually being impacted, but also the residents that live very close to the port. But it's not just the proximity of the 1 or the 2 or the 5 kilometers. It can be the rest of the city and sometimes even the rest of the regions. Port cities are more congested than non-port cities of their host countries in terms of urban traffic, no doubt about that. Approximately 70% of the world's marine emission occur in coastal areas of the port, whereas 60 or 90% of this 70% occurs during the breathing period. Whilst the vessels docks at the port, other emissions such as smog or particulate pollution, as well as dust pollution from cargo operation, can also contribute to offshore emission impact. When we looked at the onshore, at the port terminal, we have air pollution that occurs during the loading and unloading of different products, cargo, petroleum products, and dry docks products. Also, we can see volatile organic compounds, etc. So we decided to look specifically right now as a first work that has been done. I think that the last work that is being done on environmental, in general, on environmental European cities or seaport cities was done by the OECD about 10 years ago. So we decided to take a look and to see if there is actually excess in health impact in seaport cities. Should we give it a special attention? Because with that will come many policy suggestions in relation to operation onshore, but also offshore. So it's a work in progress. It's just the first work that we are doing on that, and we started looking at where the data is available. Obviously, data is not available all the time. So here is an example: the urban population exposed to port cities in certain cities that we looked into part of the European region. When we can see the circles will indicate how many, what's the size of the population that is being exposed as a result of living by the sea. We can see the different ports are focused on different activities. As I said before, it can be dry bulks and general cargo, multi-purpose passengers and vehicles, and general cargo. In general, what we are interested in seeing is really if we have the port-related activities in the center, we want to see the impact of the offshore marine transport. We want to see the port-related industry, and there are certain characteristics that you for the industry that you see around ports as a result of that, of being a port, where you have, for example, oil terminals. Then you would see refineries or things like that. Or natural gas or liquefied natural gas, you would see operation related to that. And then you have lots of traffic coming in and out, and also the onshore equipment and vehicles, etc. And all that has a huge impact, obviously, on the population. So we need to look into the potential impact. When we look at an environmental concern, we look at the potential sources that I mentioned before, in all the stages that I was mentioning. I would add to that also the fishing fleets, also shipyards, also the building of port infrastructure. We see many ports are being expanded, deepened, new ports, etc. What is the impact also of the period of developing the port infrastructure? So in terms of environmental exposure or environmental impact, we can look at air quality, we can look at noise, we can look at pollution of water pollution, which affects the aquatic ecosystem. It affects the acidification of the sea as a result of air pollution. But also think about water policy, drinking water. I know that we tend to think about marine environment as just as a marine environment, but in certain countries, I give an example, Israel or some other countries that use, for example, desalination, and they use the sea as a source of the water. So we have to keep the water clean also for the desalination activities. There is lots of waste that is being generated, soil contamination I already mentioned. There is also hazardous materials that are either being shipped, stored, flows, or processed close by to the port. And we have also with the ships potential for increasing infection diseases and invasive species to countries. So so this is one side of the environment. If you look at the other side, the health concerns, which we need to look at, it's obviously the urban dwellers near the port areas, and also the public health and employees, their health, and also, by the way, the safety, injuries and safety is very injuries and are very also relevant and important at least in the port activities. Impact from exposure to environmental concerns can be either short-term, but it can be long-term. And long-term exposure and short-term exposure, they both have different impacts on health of people. So we cannot ignore neither short-term or long-term. They all need to be taken into account. For example, particular matters of smaller than 2.5 microns associated with respiratory and cardiovascular diseases, ultrafine particles, which are very rarely being monitored, are detected in brain and heart. We have sulfur oxide, the SOx's and NOx's, which affect the respiratory airways and inflammation, bronchitis, asthma diseases, so asthma symptoms, etc. We have volatile hydrocarbons, and we have also vector-borne diseases such as the dengue and other vector-borne diseases. So we all have to look at that constantly. It's not just looking at the air pollution coming from ships, which is much of the attention of the IMO. We look at the whole environment related to those activities. The reason why we're mentioning all the time air pollution is a major issue, because according to WHO and work that is being done, air pollution is the silent killer. Every year, 7 million people die around the world due to exposure from outdoor and household or indoor air pollution. People die because of stroke, heart disease, lung cancer, both, as I said, chronic or acute respiratory diseases, including asthma. And so air pollution, by no doubt, is a major environmental risk and health. Regardless to port, we want to reduce exposure or reduce air pollutions. But when it comes to the activities around port cities, it's much more. Specifically in Europe, we know that there are 500,000 people dying every year from general exposure to air pollution. Just for example, if we ask ourselves, and this is just an example, it doesn't say this is not a rule, but this is also not the exception. But if we look at the distribution of emission, we see that ship emission often surpass other port emission. For example, in Bari, Italy, just as an example available in the literature, we can see that different pollutants coming from ships are much more in milligrams per year, are much more critical than other sources like vehicle traffics and cranes, etc. So we do need to look, obviously, also at the ships. If we looked in general, top emission sources associated with emerging public health in general in the world, so it's road transport is being nominated as number one, not necessarily again in seaport, but in general. So road transport, also housing emission resulted from heating and air conditioning, it's number two, and also shipping emission, it's number three. Several research provides information on that living near the harbor is associated with higher mortality from lung cancer and neurological diseases. So I'm not getting now into the research itself, the health research, because all health research and health paper have their own particular assumption, and they need to be looked very carefully when we investigate them according to the data that they are based, their analysis and results. But in general, there is a tendency to see that there is a link between excess of health issues in port areas. Worldwide, shipping accounts for approximately 50% of the NOx's and 5 to 8% of SOx's emissions. Across Europe, shipping emission contributes to average of 8%, 60 of PM2.5, 16.5% of the NOx's and 11% of the SOx's. In 2016, for example, if we just look at the UK, so the total of NOx's in the UK from shipping is about 10%, the SOx's is 7%, and PM2.5 is 2%. The International Maritime, in the framework of MARPOL Convention, etc., aims to reduce and regulate global shipping related to air pollution and limit those parameters. IMO set global standards for sulfurs to reduce 3.5% in the fuels to 0.5%, and this is a great achievement because they should reduce quite a bit of the sulfur. Also, we have other attempts to reduce other pollution like the NOx's. I want to move on to say just in general that more stringent, more limited regulation we can assist when it comes to the ships. But again, it's not just the ships. And also, at the end of the day, national level source-specific emission standards do not always lay out specific requirements for maritime shipping and port-related activities. Cleaner marine fuels definitely can reduce premature mortality by 35 to 55%. In Europe, we do have information that due to cleaner ship fuels, we can reduce death and childhood asthma by quite a bit of numbers. But still, nevertheless, even with sulfur marine, we have to remember that even when we reduce the sulfur level, we're still going to be seeing cases of deaths and asthma cases along the line. So it's with all these changes in regulation, IMO regulation, it is very interesting to monitor and evaluate health impact now and to see what results we can find out in the next few years. I know that we don't have much time, so I want to go quickly and just say that also the shipping industry, obviously, and also what we see in general in the activities in around the ports contribute also to greenhouse gas emissions. And this is a worldwide effort and collective action that is needed in order to reduce it, to prevent, to eliminate impact on climate. Also, I would very briefly, I want to say something about water pollution. Again, it's the operational pollution that can result from ship discharge. We see accidental pollutions that can cause environmental disasters of oil by oil tankers or by just bad connections in the port to pipes. We see garbage or litter in waste production. We see anti-fouling paints that has an impact on the sea environment, marine environment, dredging and harmful aquatic organisms. Onshore, we have also operations on terminal and fuel deposit, shipment demolition, dry docks operation, etc., etc. There is continuously identification of many environmental impacts. Also soil pollution, just in sake of time, I don't want to go into that, but there are lots of issues related to oil spillage, dust, and many other effects. There is a lot of gaps in the literature that we discovered. We failed to address specific health impacts at port cities, and the main reason for that is that there is an absence of dedicated health monitoring tools. I'm sorry about the extra wording there on the slide, but there is an absence in dedicated health monitoring tools. But also, one of the most important issues is the difficulty to separate the sources of pollution in the port environment. Oftentimes, the ports are very highly densely monitored for air pollution, but however, the identification of the source of the pollution is not very clear. Therefore, it's very difficult to address in policy what need to be dealt with, or what policy need to be directed to what kind of source of pollution. So we need to do better in that, in identifying the sources and that associated with the pollutants. Finally, I would just again, I would just summarize that again. Two data limitations are very critical. One is the lack of source-specific emission data, and secondly, also more data and more monitoring needs for the emissions, different type of sources and different pollutants, but also more monitoring in real time, almost close to real time, on marine and river pollutions. As I said, the many areas of the world, we are worrying not just to the marine aquatic environment, the biodiversity, the ecosystem itself, but also we consider the water as also a source of drinking water, and also a source that, all the food system that we have, the fishery that can get contaminated and it gets back to our plates and our tables. So this has to be carefully looked at as well. We are aware of ongoing research that was commissioned by the EU, which will be very interesting to watch when to look at the result. One is a project that was launched several years ago that looks at at health benefits and associated cost in designing additional emission control areas, because emission control obviously costs money, and we need to look into the cost and also the benefits. They looked into European cities, and the study also will assess the benefits of lowering sulfur, which is very, very interesting to find out what will be the what are the benefits in real in cases of health, morbidity and mortality. The second thing that we know that is happening is the EMSA was tasked also to develop inventories of total ship emissions in all European water based on ship activity. So this is something that in the future I would like to also to look into that and to see the progress. It will be very interesting to see that. In general, I must say that many of the research, much of the research that is all going on in health, in relation to health, is not oftentimes very, very strong, and is something that because to do the linkage between exposure to environmental risk and the impact on the health is a very tricky business in epidemiological research, and some of the research that is being done doesn't necessarily can tie between cause and effect. I will stop here. I think that we covered quite a bit. Thank you so much.